Chapter 6.
Chapter 6, flawless execution. What does that mean to you?
Flawless execution is the ability, as it says, to flawlessly, and let's take out flawlessly for a moment, execute on the search you were given, and provide a phenomenal portfolio of candidates to your clients. So really, in flawless execution, you've answered the question, if you did it really, really well, is if the portfolio of candidates was such that your employer has difficulty determining which one they should hire. You know, a lot of times what you'll hear if you've done an incredibly great job on a search is, I could hire 2 or 3 of these. That's providing, a portfolio of outstanding talent. And from a standpoint of, especially in a very strong market, it's if the top person turns the job down, you've got a very, very strong backup. So those are a couple of the reasons, meaning I see a lot of recruiters stop when they think the person, the client is going to make the offer to, and even if they make the offer, something happens and the deal doesn't come together.
What other mistakes do people make when building an effective search plan besides stopping too soon?
First of all, they don't have a strategic search plan or a plan at all. So here's what happens with a lot of people. One, they jump off the phone. They're so excited because they have a new search to work on. Something new is always exciting, or they have a search to work on, and they jump right off the call into LinkedIn, and they start perusing LinkedIn and or their database, looking for people that match the assignment. The next mistake they make is, again, they don't build a plan. The third mistake is they do their own research, thinking they're saving money and or thinking, but nobody knows what I'm looking for better than me in LinkedIn. They jump to Google. They put in even search strings to build a list. In effect, what they're doing is a $10 an hour activity where their time is worth anywhere from $150 to $300 an hour, depending on their level of billings. And the next mistake they make is they pitch jobs. I use that word pitch on purpose at candidates without fully gaining an understanding of what their needs are. So the combination of all those things makes them ineffective. And when they finally do get a hold of a candidate, they sound like every other recruiter out there. So it puts them in the commodity zone.
That's great. You talked about doing their own research and jumping onto LinkedIn. And we know passive talent is really what clients want. What is the best way to find passive talent?
The best way to find passive talent is, one, it's a numbers game. So you need to talk to a lot of people to find the best available person on the market. The promise I made our clients, and the promise we recommend to our clients, recruiting promoters and solo operators, is that the promise you make to your client is, we're going to find the best available person in the marketplace today. The key word is that, not necessarily the best person in the marketplace, because the best person may be unavailable right now. The best person might have just gotten a great raise. The best person might have a huge bonus outstanding. But the best available person in the market is, one, having a great process, and 2, talking to a lot of and engaging with a lot of candidates. So the best way to find passive talent is, again, hire a researcher to put together a great list. You want to have at least 50 people on that list, unless it's a left-handed nuclear engineer that has to be based in El Paso, Texas, and they're not going to do a reload. But every search plan should have 50 to 100 names and contacts on it. Again, that's the role of the researcher. Some of those might also be in your database. Then, over the course of 3 weeks, you want to make 5 to 7 attempts to go after each candidate before you abandon talking to them. Most passive talent will not respond after the first or second attempt. The people that the person that's very active will. Most, not all, but most passive candidates will not respond after the first or second attempt. I can't tell you how many times we had this argument with our clients, and they're like, there's no way I'm going after them 7 attempts each. And I've got testimonials that they made $50,000, $60,000 placements on the sixth or seventh attempt, where the candidate actually apologized for not getting back to them. And one of the advantages to that is most of your competitors are giving up after maybe one, two, or three attempts, and most of the best talent is available when you contact them in the fourth attempt or later. They've actually done studies on this, not only for talking to candidates, but in selling your services, that after the sixth attempt, you're likely to get a hold of 90% of the people on your list. After two attempts, you're only the likelihood is less than 20%. So one, that's how you honor your promise to your client that you'll find the best available person in the market. And then the next thing, to engage somebody who is a passive candidate. When they woke up that morning, they probably weren't thinking, I need to get a new job or I want to restart my career. But there is no such thing as a perfect company or a perfect opportunity. So when you get them on the phone, again, we talk about the mistake is that recruiters pitch jobs at candidates. Now you ask them questions like, hey, you know what, Tina Marie, I know there's no such thing as a perfect company or a perfect opportunity. If you had to describe some of the small imperfections that you have in your current role with your current company, what would some of those be? And it's basically just starting to take their mind to a place where they think about these things every day, but it kind of runs in the background because most passive candidates aren't miserable, but there is some unhappiness. So to engage a passive candidate, you have to determine, is the areas of those slight areas of discomfort in alignment with what your client is providing?
Could you quickly define what you consider an attempt? You say that it's 5 to 7 attempts. Can you give some clarity on that?
Right. Great question. So it's a combination of voicemails, emails, in-mails, text, right? So it's not just going to be 7 voicemails left in 7 days. You might send in a voicemail and then say a real quick follow-up with email. Hey, I just left you a message. No idea what's going on in your career. Just wanted to have a quick conversation to see if you're open to hearing about something potentially stronger than your current situation. You can mix it up a little bit. You might just say, especially if you've talked to them in the past, you said, if I ran across a mid-sized company that did this, this, and this to let you know, I think I found something like that. Maybe give them one teaser of something. And again, all the same verbiage can be left in voicemail, email, or text. And the last message, the 7th, is the disengagement message. Hey, Timur, I've left you some messages over the last couple of weeks. If I don't hear back from you by the close of business today, I'm going to assume you no longer want to hear about opportunities in your profession, and we'll take you off our list. If I'm mistaken, please get a hold of me at this phone number. That call actually has the highest return rate. And most people go, well, it's kind of bold. Aren't candidates, kind of ticked off? And my experience with that is, no, they're apologetic. The candidates you get in those conversations will be some of your best.
Once you finally get these people on the phone and you talk about not pitching the opportunity, but really diving into what the imperfections are, what other advice can you give on having a convincing conversation with somebody?
Some people are really, really happy. Some people are really, really happy. And that's why we ask this question. So if somebody said things are going fantastic, I always congratulate them on that. So awesome, congratulations. Tell me about the things that you love doing. So I kind of flip the conversation into why they love it there. Because I want to know that, one, as a recruiter, maybe that's a great opportunity for me to find a client based on those conversations. And number two, sometimes in the course of that conversation, they may drift to an area of imperfection. And you want to stay in a mode here where you're talking no more than 20% of the time and listening 80% of the time. But back to your point, where I've talked to some people, and let's say over the course of time or even the course of a search, I've talked to 3 or 4 people that absolutely love it where they work. I've used that as a marketing opportunity. And I've said I've called their hiring, I've called the person they report to. And if that was you and you were the VP of operations or whatever, I'd say, hey, Tina Marie, there's several people in your organization, and I've got an update for you. I just thought as an executive recruiter, you might like to know. Call has like a 98% return call rate. And I'll go, I just, figured, in today's business environment, there's a lot of stress and pressure. However, just want to let you know, I tried. I'm not going to give out any names, but I talked to a couple of your team members, and they love it there. And they absolutely love it there. And here's why they love it. I give them some specific reasons. And my call here, Tina Marie, isn't completely altruistic. I wanted to ask you, what do I need to do to earn the right to help you build your team? I'd love to find people to put them into that type of culture and environment. And sometimes you'll get a client out of that. So that's kind of a way you can use that call for future business development.
It's a great way to, use one attempt in many different ways.
Correct.
How do you successfully conduct a negotiation process between the client and candidate once you've made a match?
So we could write a book on that. It's real clear that in the initial conversation with a candidate, you begin the process of defining what he or she needs. What do they need benefits-wise? What do they need time off-wise? What do they need travel-wise? What do they need financially? You start asking questions about what are the trade-offs? If you find something you absolutely love, is the money flexible? Is there a number at which below you would walk away? Before an interview's ever taken place, most recruiters are very loose with numbers at the beginning. It's why they get stung in the background. And then throughout the interview process, let's say it's a 100K salary, and the person's at 95 and the range was, say, 90 to 110. Companies rarely pay the high end of the range. And depending on the opportunity, candidates aren't going to take a cut in salary. So number two is never give out the range. Never tell somebody who's at 95 the range is 90 to 110. The only number they've heard was 110. Is to say, okay, that's kind of a stretch. Would you make a lateral for the right opportunity? Would you go 95 to 95 for the right opportunity? I don't care whether it's yes or no. I just want to understand where their thinking is. So at 95, if this comes down as the process goes on around 95, I'll just tell them to back off and move on with another candidate. What's the number you would need at a minimum? And then you start defining that, because where these numbers often change is at the end of the process, and where most recruiters start this dialogue is at the end of the process, and it's too late. So the best way to handle a process is to check in after every interview. So now after the first interview, somebody says, for the right opportunity, I'd make a lateral, but I would probably need at least 102 to make a change. Totally reasonable. After the first interview, I'd say, is this good enough for you to consider a lateral? Because if they say, yeah, I don't care what the answer is, yes or no, as interest goes up, compensation demands come down. As compensation demands go up, interest comes down. It's a variable. If somebody is asking for more and more money as the process goes on, it's an indicator for you to go deeper into that process to uncover what's holding them back, or to see if they're just now tire kicking.
Is money the only thing that you would negotiate at this point?
Well, no, because a lot of times companies' policy on vacations is fairly static. I've seen people negotiate unpaid vacation time if they have a lot of vacation time. The benefits package is usually pretty stable. But ways companies can kind of compensate for that is a sign-on bonus and things like that. So if somebody's walking away from a superior benefits plan or things like that, that you can use things like sign-on bonuses to help compensate for that.
Probably one of the biggest frustrations for both the client and the recruiter is when you go through this entire process and then the candidate receives a counteroffer. What's your best strategy to prevent this from happening?
So one, it's why it's imperative that all the things we talked about in negotiating their salary are done, because that's something you want to start tackling on the first call, especially with a passive candidate. You want to understand exactly what those minor imperfections are, and then you want to explore those at every step in the interview process, meaning generally when we create awareness around, we help a candidate create awareness around an issue, just the way the brain works, they become more aware of it. So all those annoying things tend to multiply during an interview process. And I want to hear the candidate throughout the process talk about their attraction to the company, and what they're going to and what they're leaving. And one of the best ways to prevent a counteroffer is when you get to the end of the process at the beginning of the process, what could your company do to keep you? Well, Mike, I haven't even interviewed yet. I understand. Why don't you have a conversation with your boss, and don't tell them you're interviewing, or just say, hey, you know what? I love working here. Here's the things I really enjoy. What's your vision for me 12 to 24 months out? And there's a bunch of ways they can tackle that. They can tell you, look, go back to work, leave me alone. They can go, I had no idea you want to have this conversation. Let's set a time for lunch. Or, yeah, it's something I don't want to deal with now. And what the company then is really revealing is what their true interest in you is. If they're really serious about having that conversation, again, you're not using the threat of an interview. You're just using it as a conversation to talk about career growth. If they ignore you and then make a counteroffer, it's not a sincere counteroffer. If, however, they have that conversation, and I used to give this advice, and I would lose candidates in the process, meaning not to the counteroffer, but they would disengage after the first or second interview saying they fixed their problem at work. That's you've helped another human being. And what I find is when you tell them to have that conversation, even if they didn't, it's very hard for them to accept a counteroffer later on. Again, it's another topic where you can write a book on, but really it's being very, very helping the candidate become very, very clear on why they're leaving and what they're going to, and then constantly reminding them of those two things as you go through the process.
And that's usually what you call the acceptance, the
definition of acceptance.
Yes.
So for us in our firm, we took them through a definition of acceptance that was strenuous on basically when you say yes to this offer, even verbally, you're saying, no, I won't take a counteroffer. No, I won't consider competing offers. That you've gone through the process of flushing all that out. So again, we're not very abrupt at the end of the process. If the process took a month, these are questions we're asking the candidate to go back and investigate throughout the process. We don't want them to take an opportunity they don't want, and we don't want them to accept a job that they don't fully intend on showing up for either.
That's great. So any final thoughts on flawless execution?
Again, flawless execution is the presentation of a strong enough portfolio of candidates, and every niche is different, where the hiring manager has a multitude of candidates to pick from to make an offer, so that in a worst case scenario, somebody turns down an offer, takes a counteroffer, there's a backup. And simultaneously, this is what leads to you being a true trusted advisor. They know that every time they give you a search, they can rely on 2 or 3 outstanding candidates at the end of the process. This increases the likelihood of you getting exclusive retainers and higher fees. So look forward to chapter 7, if you're watching the video series, and that will be on the art of delegating and basically jumping into a scalable a business, one that goes beyond kind of founder dependent to a team run company.